in a world full of made up magic internet money, there's this huge industry if you can do these services. What if you brought real value from the real world and put it into the same services? Well, you have to have magnitudes of value because it's proven that it works with this stuff that's got no assets behind it. It has to work when it has all these assets, and then you bring it all together, explosion of value, new asset types, new exciting stuff. The best and most exciting things coming, we don't even know what they are today.
Welcome to Smarter Markets, a weekly podcast featuring the icons and entrepreneurs of technology, commodities, and finance, ranting on the inadequacies of our systems and riffing on ideas for how to solve them. Together, we examine the questions: are we facing a crisis of information or a crisis of trust? And will building smarter markets be the antidote? This episode is brought to you in part by IXS Exchange, bringing better price discovery and risk management tools to navigate today's commodities markets through centrally cleared, physically deliverable futures contracts in energy, environmental, battery materials, and precious metals markets. Smarter markets are here.
Welcome back to Re-engineering Tokenization on Smarter Markets. I'm Dave Greely, Chief Economist at IXS Technologies. Our guest today is Julian Kwan, CEO at IXS and InvestaX. We'll be discussing his experience in tokenizing real-world assets, finding the business models that work, how the space has evolved, and how after 8 years, it's only getting started. Hello, Julian. Welcome to Smarter Markets.
Thanks for having us, David. Yeah, good to see you here.
It's good to see you. I'm really glad you're able to join us. Been looking forward to talking with you. You're a founder and CEO of InvestaX and IXS, both of which are focused on the blockchain tokenization of real-world assets. And you've been in this space really since its beginning. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what got you interested in this space?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it. I know that you guys are doing a lot of interesting stuff on your side. What got me interested? Well, and kind of cut a long story short, I was an entrepreneur doing different businesses, SMS advertising, social media, etc. And then I exited that business. I built the first boutique hotel in Shanghai and a few co-working spaces, which sort of WeWork rebranded. And then I was kind of looking at the marriage of investments with the internet. So thinking that raising money for these projects is a big drama. It's very slow. And there has to be a better way of doing this. And there has to be something that connects to the internet to change this whole concept. So essentially, we saw the first crowdfunding models come out of the US, actually, 2013, 14, 15. We decided to launch one of the first real estate crowdfunding platforms in Asia, which is what InvestaX started as back in 2015, 16. So we started this kind of, I guess they call it like Web 2 investment platform, and then realized very quickly the tech was quite low. You had P2P, you had crowdfunding, you had different types of crowdfunding, but when actually that model was really who's got the biggest marketing budget to get people to come to your website to buy something, and then you sign a piece of paper and then you wait 5 years till the deal's done, or 10 or 20 years for a startup, right? Investment. So that was kind of the journey. And then in 2017, 18, we were based out of Singapore. We had the ICO boom and in the crypto space, and there were a lot more out of Singapore. There was like 20, 30% of ICO companies were actually underlying companies, Singapore entities. So there were a lot of events. So I immediately saw that and saw this is the tech, had a bit of an aha moment. Like this is the tech we were missing on the first version of the business, where if we issued the assets, the real world assets, at that time it was just real estate, onto these blockchains. And then if everyone's got all these coins and digital currencies, that's where we need to go. That's where it's going. And this makes a lot of sense. And then we'll have all this explosion of different assets and different use cases. Most of them, we would have no idea what they are. I mean, if you go back to 2018, no one knew what was happening today, or there'd be people that had already done it. So yeah, so it was a journey of like running a business that was trying to democratize, disrupt, globalize, digitize all these assets, and then finding out that there was a better way to do it than the way that we started. That's sort of how we got here. It was And it's been a long journey, but now it's exciting to see the world coming together. But for those that don't really know, the RWA industry started in 2018, basically. So it's kind of year 7. But that was a bit long-winded, but that was how we got it.
No, that's fascinating. And one thing I find really interesting is that you started off with real estate. And it sounds like real estate was the first interest, and then the tokenization became a way to fund it. Because it seemed like real estate would be one of the more challenging areas. If you had to pick an asset, that feels like a hard one. How did those initial tokenizations of real estate work? And how did you get people willing to leap in?
The reality is that the real estate industry is notoriously slow around technology. Very quickly, myself and my co-founder Alice is an ex-US real estate lawyer, basically said, like, we need to branch out. If you think about tokenizing shares, tokenizing equity, tokenizing debt, and now tokenizing treasuries, tokenizing private equities, like, it's for everyone. It's for every asset. And that's the same. It adds different value proposition, but it's relevant for all assets. So we actually immediately, or after the journey of 6 months, go to hundreds of these ICO events here in Singapore and go, like, I still feel like we're super early, but let's go for this because it makes a lot of sense, at least in my mind at that time. So then the first thing we said was, we're not just going to stick to real estate, because the real estate guys are notoriously slow. So I think I'm just looking out the window to this downtown Singapore. Like, I went to downtown Singapore, the CEOs of Jones Lang LaSalle, Savills, CBRE, all the biggest real estate agency, property management companies in the world, back in 2018. And I just happened to know them because I was in real estate for years before that. And I said, can I meet you? Okay, what are you doing? We do this tokenization. What the hell's tokenization? It's about digitizing shares. And why are you here? I said, we're building this platform. It's going to be all tokens of everything. So you know how you value buildings once a year? We need it every second. We could do this together. I need you guys. You're going to be great. You can be ahead of the curve. That's where it's going. Funnily enough, 7 years later, like, none of those guys have done a single thing. So we branched out and tokenized startups, and we tokenized ESOPs, and we tokenized VC funds. And now we're doing treasuries. We're like money market funds. That the financial instruments have become the sort of product market fit at the moment because they're daily liquidity, daily redemptions, and yield. So we were right on a few things. We were wrong on a few things, but we were certainly right to go way, way beyond real estate. And I think that, like, tokenization will become the format for all share issuances of every asset class, because at the end of the day, it's much easier, it's much more transparent, and it's better to manage from a government perspective. So if you're a government issuing funds and companies, you want to be on the ledger because it's more transparent, it's better. So that's what governments want. So it won't matter if you do or don't want to be in tokenization soon. Over time, there won't be another option. There will be a legacy paper share investment world that will ride out till maybe you and I are dead. But at some point, it'll just be gone. So that's sort of part of the journey. And I think that was something that was also almost kind of shot us in the foot here in Singapore. In 2018, I called the regulators like, oh, this is really exciting. We used to call RWA security tokens. So he said, okay, security tokens, what do we need to do? And they said, is it a security? And they said, yeah, it's called security token. And I said, well, got a broker deal license, like, follow your license, hung up the phone. So when you think about issuing and buying shares or debt or investments, there's a way of doing things that already exists in regulation around the world. Those ways of doing things, i.e. regulation, don't actually talk about paper, right? They don't say, Julian, you can buy a paper share of David's fund via KYC and in a venue, and blah, 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 blah. They just say you can buy a share of the real estate. That's it. So whether the real estate's on paper or token, then there are already rules. I mean, they should be probably updated. And so the Singapore government told me in 2018, you're good to go. So I was like, oh my God, we're good to go. We're ahead of the curve. Everyone's going to do this. Meanwhile, we go all in on this space, and like every other government around the world basically is like, no, no. Let's talk about it later. That went on for years, and now it's all coming together. But yeah, so there's definitely been an interesting journey.
And that's pretty amazing from a regulatory perspective, right? To say, well, you're good to go. It's the rules are the rules. The rules don't say it has to be paper. It sounds like that wasn't your experience with governments outside of Singapore necessarily.
No, not at all. I mean, the US turned it on this year, but they were anti, or when you're not providing clarity as a regulator, that is anti. All right. When you're providing clarity, that's pro. So America provides clarity now. But what about the last 6 years? Hong Kong's providing clarity last year and a half or so. Korea's trying to do it now. Japan's been on and off. Just talking about a few big countries, few big jurisdictions. Yeah, and a lot of other countries still haven't said anything about this, right? So it was definitely like pro Singapore, very logical approach. Why do we need new rules? Because of blockchains, and also what are we going to have different rules for different blockchains? We're going to have different rules for different smart contracts, standards. Like none of that makes sense today. So it's actually easier, better, efficient, real, instant to just say, look, just follow the rules we've got right now, and we're going to try and update them once we work this out, because it's a security is a security, paper, token, written on a piece of plastic, whatever. So that was logical. I mean, whether they were so far ahead of the curve, they knew it was that logical. But when I talk about it now, I still think, oh, it's quite logical. And it should be the way it is, right? And so, yeah, that's how it went.
When you think about the clarity that the space needs from governments, are there specific things you need clarity on?
Yes, I think there is. So I was just trying to run through this in my head. I'm thinking, if you're from TradFi and you know what you're doing, do you need more clarity on what you're doing? Probably not, right? If you're from real crypto and you're young, never worked in TradFi, and you're just like, why do we have to KYC? What's the difference between shares in David's real estate token or that crypto? Then yeah. But again, the rules are already there. But now it's getting very gray, I would say again, especially from the US and the Trump administration's super pro crypto stance. It also can see huge amount of projects. I'm just going to say playing in the gray area, right? Shouldn't that? How are they selling that to anyone with no KYC, all this kind of stuff? And again, I'm pro industry, pro development. So I guess when you go from a market that's trying to be killed to a market that's being let's turn you into like Jesus Christ, the Savior, then people start immediately taking advantage of that. But I guess that's pro is better than con. But yeah, look, ultimately, I just think people forget in crypto, people used to always say, actually, I used to get laughed out at conferences and RWA is stupid and KYC is stupid. And that people used to say that to me. I mean, it sounds a bit funny saying it now, but I had that lots of times. We were hated at times. I'm talking 2019, 2020, before. And I was like, why are you saying this stuff? And they're like, oh, KYC is stupid. I'm like, yeah, but do you own a company? And they go, yeah. Do you got investors? Yeah. And I'm like, do you know who they are? And they go, yeah. I go, so that's what the KYC, you can't just have shares of your company. The difference was that crypto and ICOs, they want as many buyers as possible, and they don't care who the hell buys. So that was the main distinction. It was just well, we want to sell to everyone. And I said, but everyone with securities would like to sell to as many people as possible. They don't want to sell to people that give them trouble. And they don't give to people that don't understand what's going on and then start complaining. But we all kind of want the same thing. But if we don't have rules, everyone gets ripped off. And then crypto has been another crystal clear example of what happens when there are no rules. How many rug pulls, how many bullshit projects, scamming projects, etc. And so there's this weird, I don't know if it's a dichotomy or this weird irony or this weird position that a lot of people in crypto, and then now I say to them, we have lighter KYC than Binance and Coinbase. That's the kind of the irony of the situation, because they were all playing, certainly Binance was playing, and other crypto exchanges were playing way out left field. Now to get legitimized in jurisdictions that want to see some kind of framework, they've had to now build in almost the same, if not more onerous KYC than RWA platforms. And then bang, we're all equal. We might even be in a better spot now because they're more worried about crypto than they are of security. So that's an interesting sort of turn of events.
I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, that clearly real estate wasn't the first movers, or wasn't where you would find the first movers. As you started to branch out to other assets, where was the one where you started to get traction, where people were like, yeah, let's do this?
But I should talk about where did the whole industry get traction, all right? Because it's the same place. 2018, 2022, 23, every single RWA asset was private asset. There was no such thing as a financial instrument, a tokenized treasury, a tokenized money market fund, like a homogeneous, ubiquitous kind of app instrument. So it was hard. People are trying to scale up. We did lots of projects, 500,000, 1 million. They're successful in some ways, but not if the guy wanted $25 million and he got one, right? So what happened in circa 2023 was that I think to the astonishment, well, I think of maybe the astonishment of everyone, right? Because if people had thought about this before, they would have done it before. So to the astonishment of myself and other people in the industry, people started tokenizing treasuries, putting them on chain. And why was that? That was actually the catalyst, the biggest thing that ever happened at this whole industry. Because there's $200 billion of stable coins earning 0% interest. So what people didn't get until that moment was if we bring yield-bearing products, US, Wall Street, institutional, daily liquidity, just like DeFi, that's very key, with a real yield, US dollar yield, not a DeFi coin yield, not stake ABC coin for EFG coin and all great till the house cards fall down. Let's do this. So the real product market fit for everyone was these tokenized treasuries that were paying 4 or 5% just 2 years ago. And again, I say that was kind of blew everyone's socks off because what the hell? Like I thought tokenization was about liquidity for liquid assets and opening up, democratizing everything. I mean, everyone can buy a treasury and it's already over there. No, we're missing the point, everyone. We're missing the point that like, you got to put stuff on this. If all the dollars are on the rails, you need all the other assets on the rails. But again, in crypto, this very unique element that stablecoin Genius Act, 0% interest for any stablecoin holders. What do I do with this dollar? But just besides buy a Bitcoin, what am I doing when I'm not holding a Bitcoin? I want to just earn some money, buy a treasury. So that's how it really took off. Almost disappointing, probably disappointingly for a lot of us who didn't think that we'd just go all the way back to Wall Street. But we did, and Team America wins again. And so my wife's American, so that's sort of, I guess I get half a benefit of that. But that's what happened, right? So then we have money market funds. I think we're now moving private credit tokens. And of course, there's a world of private assets being tokenized, but also they still predominantly suffer the same challenge they have in the paper world. You know, who knows about them? Why are you buying them? Is there a liquidity? All this kind of stuff. So, but the net is very positive. And I think we're seeing that as you're in the US, like Scott Bessent, trillions of dollars stable coins. What are they going to buy? They're all going to buy treasuries. Okay, so what's next? And I think the best, one of the most promising asset classes that we'll see explode this cycle, or for those that don't think there's a cycle, like next year, private credit tokens, higher yielding instruments of similar quality at least, and that are producing yield because we've got partnerships with crypto exchanges and fintech platforms, and crypto exchanges most relevant. What's the opposite to crypto, right? What's the opposite to an altcoin? Probably a treasury token. All right. If you think about the spectrum of risk, reward, what you're really getting. So it actually then makes a lot of sense why a lot of crypto guys want treasuries, even though the rest of us are like, well, that's really boring. You can get them everywhere. It's just because, oh, hang on. Where are they coming from? They're coming from 0% interest US dollar coins or crypto that moves like this every second. So, okay, here we go. Let's do these yield bearing instruments. So that's kind of the journey. We'll see where it goes from here.
Who gets the yield when you have the stable coin backed by treasuries? Is that the stable coin issuer, the tokenizer, or is there enough competition to pass it through?
Well, so if I buy USDC, which is Circle or USDT Tether, they get 100% of the treasury that they use my $100 to go and buy the treasuries. They get 100% of that return. But if I take my USDC or USDT and I buy a treasury RWA token, I get 100% of the yield. So it depends which direction you're facing. But now, thankfully, the RWA industry has delivered a solution to those earning no yield, which is take those dollars and buy them, use them somewhere else. So sort of, I guess, American dollar doubles down. But yeah, so that's the Genius Act. All the stable coins are not allowed to pay interest, which initially was a bug versus a feature, or a feature of the bug. It was, what I'm trying to say is when they started these stable coins in about 10 or 12 years ago, I think one of the reasons they didn't pay interest because the original use case was if there's all these crypto in an exchange, we need like paired tokens. Bitcoin versus Ethereum is great, but hang on, that's a bit confusing. Can we just have Bitcoin versus USD? And then if we have USD token, then it can't be earning interest because how's that going to work? And then actually, if it's paying interest, that's a security. So then we'll need security licenses and that's not going to work either. So That's why I think like Tether and Circle, less so, but Tether, like just probably the luckiest guys on planet Earth. They've ended up with the best business model in the world because they weren't really allowed to do it another way that they probably thought of in the first place. Oh, we should pay some yield, but then hang on, no, we keep 100% of the returns because it's illegal for me to give it to you. $200 billion, 5% every year. It's crazy.
So starting to give flashbacks to the US banking industry in the late 70s, early 80s with Reg Q and everything else. It all comes around. You had mentioned that when you started 7, 8 years ago, so not a long time ago, the technology wasn't necessarily where you wanted it, or maybe not the technology, but just the infrastructure to do what you wanted to do. And did you end up having to build a lot of that yourself to make this tokenization work?
Yeah, exactly. Who's got this? Who's got that? No one. All right, let's try and build it ourselves. Like, yeah, there's a lot to be said about being too early in a space. But yeah, exactly. We started with InvestaX, broker dealer, an ATS license application, 4 or 5 years, get approval. It was very difficult back in the day because you're in the regulator drawing pictures. Bitcoin buys RWA token. So they're like, what the hell are you talking about? So that was very difficult because that's what we were doing, but no one else was there. And then you fast forward to now, the regulators are 5 years of seeing every single business plan in the world so that their knowledge is galactically vertical. And then everyone's worked it out now. So the line around the block trying to get these licenses. So it was difficult back in the day because nothing really existed. And now it's very, very difficult because everyone's realized very quickly, very recently, that this is the way of the world and we need to get in there. So it's like, there was a lot of that. I mean, there was no custodians when we started for RWA. The reason we have our sister platform, IXS, it was the first real world asset DEX. So in 2021, we were like, well, we haven't even got our ATS license approved yet. So, but where's liquidity for all these assets? And hang on, if everything gets tokenized, most of it's not going to belong in a centralized exchange. It's not going to be big enough. There's not going to be any market makers and da 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 da. So we looked at crypto and we thought back in 2017-ish, there was, or pre-2017, the only way to buy and sell crypto was really on Coinbase and Binance and centralized exchanges because the decentralized exchanges had no liquidity because there was nothing there. It was just a listing board. So along came the development of the automated market maker model, which was the smart contract led to crypto, can start a liquidity pool. Anyone can start a liquidity pool, Uniswap, PancakeSwap, SushiSwap, OTC type model, but allowed anyone to start a liquidity pool on their own with the assets, right? And then, as you know, the liquidity in some of those DEXs is far bigger than a lot of the sexes. So we thought, why don't we try and build the Uniswap for RWA, which was IXS. The difference would be their securities. We're going to need broker dealers. We're going to need custodies. We're going to need licenses. So we actually built the first RWA DEX in the history of planet Earth. It was very, very challenging and no one ever heard about it and no one knew what was going on. We put up about 7 or 8 private assets that were small, a couple 100,000 different pools. But yeah, it was one of our biggest non-payment successes, as in like we successfully did it. Like we haven't been paid for that yet because people are still scratching their heads being like an RWA DEX. Like what the hell are you talking about? But now we're building version 2, but now you're starting to see, but that was a good example of why we're building an entire business. Well, because we're building it because like the clients on InvestaX are so, well, how am we get the liquidity? I want to be in your exchange. It's like, you don't belong in an exchange. Like, no offense. What does that mean? I'm like, go over here. What can you do? You take your $1 million of your startup token and your $1 million USDT, you start a liquidity pool. What the hell's that? So we have definitely, there's few great companies in the space, but yeah, a lot of people have been forced to build either products or assets or services that didn't exist because it just didn't exist. And then it was not by desire, but by necessity, I would say.
And you said you've been focused on more of the regulated institutional space. A lot of obviously tokenization efforts have been more associated with the unregulated, more retail oriented space. How do you see that developing? Do you see these converging over time or are they just different areas?
So my experience is we offered $1, one USDT, USDC equity tokens to anyone besides Americans at the time. And we sold a few. So we delivered the promise of what tokenization, democratization for everything. What we realized was most of the retail investors in this space so far, they don't care about RWA. They care about 100x meme coin, but boom or bust, right? So we delivered this promise of our mission statement, and it felt like no one really cared. But it was really just a different market. So who has led the buying of RWA? It is not retail investors. It's crypto investors, family office. Who's sitting on a lot of stable coins? Degens aren't sitting on stable coins. They buy stable coins to buy shit coins. That's what they do, right? At the casino, that's why they're there. They're not here for 1x. They're here for 100x or zero. So RWA is one of the frustrating parts about RWA is that just the term itself, right? Real world asset tokens encompasses stablecoins, which are essentially dollar-backed coins. It's very different from a real estate equity token or a debt token or a security token, whatever. And it's very different from tokenizing a baseball card was also called. So RWA, which is very different from utility tokens of RWA platforms. Ondo token, even IXS token, that's a cryptocurrency. It's not an RWA. So there's four major different buckets to the concept or the categories of RWA tokens, which most people don't know because they don't spend their life building it. But we then have to build in this space where there's the understanding, right? And then if you're from TradFi, RWA has a different meaning altogether, and people hate calling RWA tokens. Yeah. So some of the challenges of being in their space, but this is basically like the fifth time our industry's been rebranded since we began. So we used to be called security tokens and sort of then STOs. And at one point we were called digital securities and then digital security offering DSO. And I'm sure there were a couple of others. And then somehow in the last year or two, and this is not my fault because I'm not that big. I'm not big enough to influence this. Now we're RWA. Real world asset tokenization, which is like 4 or 5 different categories. But I think this one will stick because it covers so many things that no one wants to be left out, but we'll see.
When you think about the institutions, how receptive have they been to this? And what are the challenges in getting them to take part in this market?
So it's definitely an institutional TradFi appetite, use case, etc. I think that's key. I mean, yes, anyone can use them and they're used through crypto and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the velocity of payments, every Visa, MasterCard, Revolut, Robinhood, Coinbase, like every single fintech and payment company in the world, Meta tried this years ago when they were Facebook and they got shut down, wants to launch a stable coin because like if you've got a massive audience and a platform, who doesn't want a 500% of the 5% return from the treasury token or whatever the yield is? Who doesn't want that? I mean, everyone wants that. It's crazy. And the US government wants as many stable coins as possible because it increases US dollar dominance and it's a guaranteed buyer of the debt. So I think we'll just see an explosion. I think there'll be a lot of, I don't have enough time for this, but I think a white labeled stablecoin business is going to be an incredible business because everyone wants their own branded thing, but then you got to deal with the whole licensing, regulation, capital formation. But yeah, I just think that it's going to continue to grow. I think it'd be hard to unseat the top guys. I'm not saying they're undefeated. It's impossible to defeat them, but network effects are strong. Those USDT and to a much lesser extent USDC are everywhere in the crypto space. But yeah, it's a big wide world, right? $200 billion of cash is tokenized, or maybe 300. There's, I don't know how much the number is, trillions and trillions of dollars of cash that's not tokenized yet. So it's a big wide world.
When you think about it, you've seen cycles, you've seen the evolution over recent years. And what does it take to turn that tokenization into a profitable business? Sounds like network effects play a role, but what business models have you seen fail and succeed?
I've seen a lot of models fail. The first models 5-6 years ago were called token issuance only. So I'll tokenize your asset. Okay, great. Pay me some money. I'm a technology company. Okay, and then what? It's like, well, that's it. And so, well, where do people buy it? Well, I don't know. I'm not a broker dealer. Where do people sell it? I don't know. Don't have a license. We're going to exchange now. I don't know about that. So that model, people are still launching them today because I guess haven't done their research, but it's been very, very difficult. There's only been one successful one that I can call in the history of time because it was bought by a massive asset manager that had the buy side, sell side. So it really was a technology software acquisition versus like a solution to everything. But then we had really by I would say just timing, as in it was too early. We had the first RWA exchanges. T0 was still live in America, but another one, Open Finance, for others, they just weren't the right assets, and they're just like, we're just too early. Assets were an issue, market makers an issue, etc. Now it's changing because many more players are coming into the space, either on the buy side, sell side, which just hasn't been there before this year. Robinhood wants to tokenize stocks, and Coinbase wants to buy that same thing, and BlackRock wants to tokenize their assets to get at every single person's wallet. So I think it's been iterations. Ourselves, we offer sort of advising and structuring services, and we offer like a software as a service model. So if you want to issue an asset, the co-brand section, you pay a monthly fee and you can tokenize whatever you want. And there's buy, sell, we handle everything. So that's been the kind of the short version of the different models. And now there's other services in the space, but I think that most people just don't think about it. I wouldn't even say forget. The securities market's insane. Like the real world assets in the world, infinitely bigger than crypto. By magnitudes you can't even barely talk about. So there will be infinitely more RWA than crypto, although they exist to help each other. They create use case for each other. And so we're just sort of getting started, and people say to me, oh, well, BlackRock stitched up the market. And I'm like, well, let me just do some research. BlackRock is one of what Google says is 30,000 give or take asset managers in the world. So basically, if you think BlackRock's won the market because that's all you've heard of, you're talking about one out of 30,000. They might be the biggest, but there's 29,999 other guys that are yet to get started. And then it's the same on like, oh, well, Coinbase or Securitize is doing RWA. It's like, okay, well, how many banks are there? How many broker dealers are there? How many private equity groups? How many fund managers? How many asset managers? How many family offices? So yeah, it's really just getting started. I feel like it's kind of blue ocean, and there'll be a lot of different models that sort of make money out of this, but still early.
Julian, you talked about that we're in the 8th year here of the industry. I'm tempted to use an American analogy and say, like, what inning are we in of the baseball game? Are we still in the beginning? Are we at the middle? Doesn't sound like we're anywhere near the mature state of the industry. So where do you see us now, and where do you see it going?
I'd say we're running onto the pitch, to be honest. It's almost a bit disappointing to say that 7 years later, but like, yeah, it's really just beginning. I think 99% of finance companies have never done anything. So I think it's going to dramatically grow. It's great to see the US back on positive foot related to this. It leads so much from a philosophical, conceptual, capital perspective, power around the world. So I think we're just getting started. I think there's going to be where I think it's going is very exciting. I think it's going right now where it should go, where it should have always gone, and what we've always been thinking about. It's running headfirst into DeFi. So tokenization, real asset tokens. It's not about tokenizing the share of your company and selling it to someone else that doesn't care, and that's just because it sounds cool. It's about taking any particular asset, putting it on chain, giving it multi-dimensional use case, lending, borrowing, collateral, whatever, used in another platform, bringing that sort of value and multi-use case and velocity to those assets. And then where are all these different channels that never existed before, whether they're in DeFi pools, whether they're in DEXs, central exchanges, whether it's sexy central exchanges, whether they're in Robinhood or Coinbase or whatever. So it's all, and what is the offer now? Is it a straight equity? Is there some kind of interesting tokenomics around it? Is it connected to some other crypto, like that's related to the platform that's issuing? So I think that's where it's going. That's where it should go. There's no point in putting all this stuff on chain and then just trying to just run stuff normally like we did before. And DeFi has had its ups and downs, but it's certainly had product market fit. But essentially, people who don't know anything about DeFi, it's essentially, in my mind, banking services for crypto. Lending, borrowing, collateralization, staking is just depositing, yield bearing something is just interest accounts. Like, we come up with all these new fancy names or different names, but it's all the same stuff. So it's basically showing that in a world full of made up magic internet money, there's this huge industry if you can do these services. What if you brought real value from the real world and put it into the same services, Well, you have to have magnitudes of value because it's proven that it works with this stuff that's got no assets behind it. It has to work when it has all these assets, and then you bring it all together, explosion of value, new asset types, new exciting stuff. And the last thing I'd say is that the best and most exciting things coming, we don't even know what they are today. That's for sure. I think that'll come out over time. That's how we do it as humans. When we have new technologies and new things, we keep evolving. It just gets better and better. And we need new, younger, smarter people to come in after us to come up with like the latest and greatest. So yeah, very excited by all the stuff. We don't even know what is coming yet. We know it's coming because if you go back to 2017 and we started doing these security tokens, there was no real NFTs. There was no meme coins. There were no real DAOs. There was no Uniswap. There wasn't really DeFi. There wasn't Bitcoin yielding products and MicroStrategy and now Bitcoin. Everything that's happened since then had never been invented before. And we kind of take it for granted that, oh, this is this new thing this week. It's like, what other industry is there a whole new thing every week? Nowhere. There's nowhere like it. So see how it plays out.
Thanks again to Julian Kwan, CEO at IXS and InvestaX. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll be back next week with another episode of Re-engineering Tokenization. We hope you'll join us.
This episode is brought to you in part by IXS Exchange, bringing better price discovery and risk management tools to navigate today's commodities markets through centrally cleared, physically deliverable futures contracts in energy, environmental, battery materials, and precious metals markets. Smarter Markets are here. Contact sales at abax.exchange to get started. That concludes this week's episode of Smarter Markets by IXS. For episode transcripts and additional episode information, including research, editorial, and video content, please visit smartermarkets.media. Please help more people discover the podcast by leaving a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. Smarter Markets is presented for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information presented on Smarter Markets should not be construed as investment advice. Always consult a licensed investment professional before making investment decisions. The views and opinions expressed on Smarter Markets are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the show's hosts or producer. Smarter Markets, its hosts, guests, employees, and producer, IXS Technologies, shall not be held liable for losses resulting from investment decisions based on informational viewpoints presented on Smarter Markets. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week.